Greetings, podcast powerhouses. Welcome to the Marvelous TV Club, a podcast tackling our collective obsession with the latest releases from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that means it's time for our final episode dedicated entirely to the season finale of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Every week we analyze the newest chapter of the MCU from 3 unique angles you will only find on this podcast. Our Storycast this week got into the themes of patriotism versus nationalism and how this episode interrogates what it means to govern. On Character Cast, Christine and I discussed the messy introduction of Sam as Captain America, what they got right and wrong about Isaiah's story in the finale, and so much more. You should also stay tuned for our first ever epic crossover event coming next week. We are going to have all 5 of your Marvelous TV Club favorites together for the first time to talk about the Marvel TV project to date and where things are headed. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To round out this week, it is time for the one and only PonderVision. This show looks forward and back, inside the Falcon and Winter Soldier and beyond it, because the questions that arose from this finale extend way beyond this show and into the wider MCU and its production process. I am your host, Marc Faletti, and as always, I'm joined by a legal mind so sharp even the Contessa would fear him as an adversary, Jesse Taylor. What's up, Jesse?
I am doing pretty well tonight, and I am honored to be placed in the same conversation as JLD and any character she's playing.
Can I just say that Julia Louis-Dreyfus name-dropping Baron Zemo would have really done it for 1990s Mark. Like, that's a fetish I did not know I had.
And how could you?
Yeah.
Would 90s you have ever thought you're watching Seinfeld?
And she's going to be the one to say the name Baron Zemo, unironically, well, kind of ironically, because it's Julia Louis-Dreyfus. But I mean, I can't believe we live in a world where that happened. This world is fucked up, but that's a really beautiful little corner of it. All right. So look, I don't want to get out of ourselves. We're going to have a bunch of questions, entertaining questions, meta questions, uncomfortable questions. This week, though, we're going to change it up a little and allow ourselves to ask questions from any of these categories because it's the finale and we want to see where the conversation takes us. It's PonderVision. We like to keep you guys on your toes as much as we keep ourselves on our toes. But I just want to start super basically because last week we talked about episode 5 as potentially a top 10 MCU entry on its own. But it is safe to say that most people don't feel the same way about the finale. So we're going to get into all the details and all the questions. But I just want to know, what did you think after having a little time with it, Jesse? What would you give it in terms of like a 5-star rating system?
I would give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
I enjoyed the action. I thought the action was spectacular. I even enjoyed a lot of the character choices and the plot choices. But what this episode brought home to me, and we'll get into this later, but it brought home to me how much I wish this show had 2 more episodes. I just wanted to know more about everything. And I think it's the mark of a good show, but it's also the mark of an incomplete show.
Well, and there's the COVID stuff that I think got into some of the, complications of the show. So we'll talk about those things too. Yeah, there's a lot to untangle from this, but perfection isn't the standard for me. It's not perfect. There are some warts on this show. But damn, I loved every second of Bucky and Sam together in this finale, particularly. That party montage and that final shot of them together chokes me up every single time. And you can add the Julia Louis-Dreyfus shit, all of it. Like, I don't know. It does it for me. It's not perfect. Christine's got some great points about the costume just not quite coming off effectively. I hear all that. I recognize a lot. I feel some of that because, the ears were weirding me out too, but I don't know. I just rewatched it again before we recorded, and I'm like, I enjoyed this, man.
Actually, the ears, I love the ears. It was the one thing I liked, and it's because John Walker's ears looked so weird this entire series.
Yeah.
That hiding the ears, I liked it. Also, it made more sense to me as a character who flies around a lot.
But that's the thing. His ears were exposed. He's going to get frostbite. That's what I was talking about with Christine.
Maybe the Wakandans thought about that. They're like, this idiot's been flying around with his ears out the entire time.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. So I do want to start with an entertaining question, and we'll see where it takes us from there. We know that Malcolm Spellman is co-writing Captain America 4. It could go anywhere. I love the possibilities of it. I'm excited that Anthony Mackie is going to get his movie. We had talked on this show about the fear that there was going to be like a TV version of shit that was a little more progressive, but they were going to steer clear of taking it to the movie level. But now we know that's probably not true. So Jesse, What should Captain America 4 be about, and or who should be the main villain?
So I think we have to stick with what makes Captain America movies great and also keeps them differentiated from the other mainline Marvel entries, which is that they are more down to earth.
Interesting.
In the sense that, anything involving a helicarrier and international conspiracies can be down to earth.
Red Skull's very normal.
Exactly. But if you look at every Captain America movie, even the big one, Civil War, where it's just an explosion of characters, I mean, the main battle in that movie happens at an airport in Germany. It's not like it's happening on a moon base where Steve Rogers is right now.
Where he 100% is, yeah.
Right.
Hanging out with the Watcher, who we'll meet in What If.
Yeah. So what I think they should do in Captain America 4, and I'm looking up the group just so I can make sure that I know what I'm talking about. We had Hydra running the government in Winter Soldier. And I think that we should have a version of the Secret Empire. And I'm not sure if you've heard of the Secret Empire.
Only a little. It's not part of the stuff I've read. So talk to me. What is that?
So it's a 70s era Captain America story where effectively another group was infiltrating the government and looking to bring it down. And there was number one in the Secret Empire, the person who ran it, and it was strongly hinted that it was Richard Nixon, which I thought was a great touch.
Not far from the truth, though.
Right. Except they had Nixon commit suicide. So I think we kind of knew where the writers stood.
Okay.
Just choked Mark up a little bit.
Yeah, that's wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. So I could see some version of that and probably a different take on it because you can't really do Captain America 2 Secret Group runs the government, Captain America 4 Secret Group runs the government, but something like that that's a little bit more systemic.
Okay.
And I also think that Captain America 4 has to start that transition into what I would call the second generation of Marvel heroes, where you have a lot of people who are either taking over or being inspired by the original identities. Mm-hmm. We know that in the comics, there's Ironheart, for instance, who takes over a lot of Tony Stark's role as Iron Man, a black woman who also has sort of the intellect and mechanical genius to build and maintain her own suit. We know we're going to have Ms. Marvel, and we know that there's going to be Shang-Chi. We don't know what role the Eternals are really going to play, but we have to assume that gets toward the bigger cosmic storylines that are going on. But we're going to have a far more diverse and kind of second generation version of Marvel heroes that we're going to have to integrate into the larger narrative. And I could see Sam Wilson as being the bridge between the original and the new group, being the person who brings them in. So I think we get kind of a blend of 2 and 3, where we have that larger cloak and dagger kind of chicanery going on, plus some of that integration of the new group, them looking to Sam as the leader.
That's pretty cool because Captain America movies, or at least with Civil War, was kind of a secret Avengers movie anyway. Why not take that to the next level, introduce the Young Avengers or some other group through Captain America 4? That's brilliant. But I'm also really into what you're saying about making some kind of election-related movie. I've got a pitch for you for a candidate, and it's someone we've talked about on this show before. We originally wondered whether or not...
If it's Mephisto, just stop.
Goddamn, I swear to God, I'm not going to say the M-word this whole episode. It's not in the agenda unless, I don't know, it comes up organically. It's not in the plan, though, I swear. Okay. No. What we have talked about is that we thought Aaron Kellyman's character might have been Sin, who is, in the comics, the Red Skull's daughter. Well... what if instead it's something like the great-granddaughter of the Red Skull, raised as a member of the American elite, and she's a candidate for president or for governor or senator or something like that? You know, we could have a whole election drama genre inside the Marvel genre bag. So it would give us a chance to show that, you know, we can tackle things about like how elections are always these semi-rigged games that go to these elites and are actually kind of pre-planned. And it's not so much the pull yourself up by your bootstraps person, or at least it not often is the case. And it would tie into what you're saying about people inheriting these mantles, that this woman would be coming in to be the new Red Skull, the face of new fascism inside the United States. And then she could have a next generation of minions and foes that work for her that could be battling these younger, new additions to the Marvel Universe. I don't know. What do you think about Sin as a presidential or senatorial candidate, maybe?
I like that. It's really going to depend on where we are in society.
Ooh, yeah. Too soon? Is that what you're saying? Too soon?
Too soon, or maybe even too early, depending on what happens in 2024. If it's
God, he's going to run again, isn't he? Yeah,
he's going to run again, and it doesn't really matter how well or poorly things are going. It's going to be some kind of nail biter in some respect.
My only request is that the new Captain America movie not have D-Man in it. That's the number one piece of Captain America lore I want nothing to do with. For folks who do not know who the hell D-Man is, D-Man was a wrestler who was part of this group that had been juiced up by the Power Broker. I think the original Battlestar was also in this same extended group of wrestlers because it was the 80s. Wrestling was popular. D-Man's whole shtick was, I have a mohawk, but I'm going to go ahead and put that underneath this cowl because I'm going to make a costume that looks exactly like the original Daredevil costume, which is this yellow and brownish kind of monstrosity, if I'm being honest. But I'm going to throw a D on the chest because somehow Demolition Man, which is what that stood for, is going to seem different than Daredevil. It was one of the weirdest, dumbest choices in the comics in the 80s, and that is saying something.
And I remember D-Man, and I actually remember picking up the issue of Captain America later on that had D-Man's first appearance in it.
328, I believe. I just read it a few months ago again. I was like, God, this is terrible. I was such a dumb, weird kid.
And it just mixes up everything that made no sense in comics in the 80s. It's like, here's a thing that's popular. So how do we do it in the ugliest, most clumsily executed way? And it was this. And it made no sense that it had any connection to Daredevil. It made no sense that his mask was Wolverine's mask. Why?
Yeah.
Like, they were just like, it's Captain America, and we need popular characters. Daredevil's popular. Wolverine's popular. Wrestling is popular. If we put all three of those together.
Yeah. No, that's it. You figured it out. It's basically the 80s play for commercialization. It was the era of G.I. Joe and the Transformers, and everybody was just looking for ways to commercialize as much as they could. And they probably tried and failed to get Hulk Hogan as a character, and they had to scramble and insert D-Man instead.
Can you imagine being the kid where people come over and the only toy you have is the D-Man toy? Like, I've got He-Man, I've got Ninja Turtles.
You get bullied. Yeah, that's the kid who gets bullied, which is unfair, uncool, always terrible. I was often that kid. But just, you're definitely going to take some lumps. Is there anyone you do not want to see in Captain America 4 from the Captain America catalog?
If I had to pick one character, and this isn't just one, it's a group of characters.
Okay.
That should never see the light of day anywhere. It's the Coney Island Cruisers.
Who the hell are they?
Oh, Mark, can you even be a real comic book fan if you don't?
You're saying I should have had those pajamas growing up or something?
Yeah. So I think they were a 70s, maybe early 80s era group, like a biker gang.
Okay.
That Captain America fought and easily defeated. And they were obviously from Coney Island. They were a biker gang that cruised. And they fought Captain America for reasons. They got, they even got to be on the cover of at least one comic.
Oh my God.
And I'm looking at it right now, and they're obviously just picking up whatever's in an old pinball warehouse and trying to beat up Captain America with it. But other than that, other than sitting around and deciding that their collective name was going to be the Coney Island Cruisers, they literally have no reason to exist.
It is wild that Marvel sold any of these comics at all sometimes.
But what's funny is, if you think about certain character choices that had been made, like imagine you're reading the first issue of Wolverine, or the first appearance of Wolverine, which was in the Incredible Hulk 181, I think. And the entire concept of Wolverine is a unitard wearing Canadian superhero with claws who just hangs out in the wilderness and is angry a lot.
And now it's...
Yeah, and if not for certain character choices, that it would just be another character consigned to the dustbin of history.
Yeah, people will be making fun of it the way we just roasted D-Man.
Yeah. So, speaking of costumes, why did John Walker and Val and his wife collectively head back to the Senate chamber where he was stripped of his role as Captain America to change into his U.S. agent costume?
I do have an in-universe answer that I want to give you before we leave this question, but I'll start with what is obviously probably the answer, which was this whole scene was clearly a COVID scramble.
Oh, completely.
They probably had Julia Louis-Dreyfus for one day because she's also the person who appears right outside that chamber when John Walker is summarily discharged. So she clearly did all those scenes in like a half day or a day. And they were like, let's just throw him in this room so that we can get this changed. Because those are the same three characters that also interact outside that chamber and knock this out super quick. I'm just surprised at how little they tried to change the appearance of that room. I feel like it wouldn't have been the hardest thing in the world to make that look like a different room in the same building. And the other thing that was funny to me was the look on the face of the actor playing his wife. Like, she seemed confused or skeptical about the entire thing. So I wonder if Julia Louis-Dreyfus was riffing the entire fucking time or something.
That's what it felt like to me, where they sat down, they'd met Julia Louis-Dreyfus 15 minutes earlier.
Yep.
They probably hadn't even filmed the blank business card scene from the prior episode. And they said, okay, you're his wife. He's going to have a new costume. Julia knows what's going on. We don't really have lines for you. I think if she had lines, if the actress...
It was the helmet line. The wife just said that it's probably the helmet, which also doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would it be the helmet? What does that mean?
So I felt like the actor who played the wife just literally came in and they maybe didn't even have lines for her. And they said, we got to get this done. Julia's got half an hour left. We just need you to, Wyatt, walk out in the costume, be happy about it. You'll just figure this out, and we'll make it all make sense in post.
Yeah, and they mostly succeeded. I want to give you my in-universe answer, and I'm trying to do my best here for the show, because this is not their fault. This is nobody's fault.
No.
The Contessa doing this in this room could be seen as a massive flex, Jesse. She is showing John that she controls enough of the levers of government to get access to a very powerful and important space, right? Which he is familiar with. And she is also showing John that she understands him and, like him, is extremely fucking petty. Because she had to know that he would love to put on his cool new uniform and declare that he's back in the same room where they stripped him of the old uniform and told him to go packing. And I actually think that works for the story. Did I convince you that it works for the story?
You convinced me enough. I think that it would have been a little more convincing had Sharon also not been pardoned and reinstated as an agent in the exact same room with the exact same setup in a subsequent scene. That almost made it seem like they snuck in between hearings. Going back, change into the costume.
Yeah. And I don't think the U.S. agent name landed with folks who aren't comics fans, so they have some work to do there to make that make any sense. That's another one where it felt fun to me, but I could also, at the first time I watched it, think, we're going to need a U.S. agent is not a line that actually makes any logical sense.
No. And it was definitely, the sense I got was exactly what you said, where they needed to fit this in. They probably had ideas about how to get the name, how to include him in the canon to make it all make sense. And U.S. agent as opposed to Captain America, like the names play off of each other, but they play off of each other because of the backstory that's built up with the characters, not because the Contessa walks in and just says, you're a U.S. agent.
Yeah, we're going to need a U.S. agent. Well, I mean, do we?
Right.
So, okay, I actually want to move to a meta question based on what we're talking about, because we got a little meta with this question, and it is this. The original Flag Smashers plot reportedly had something to do with bioterrorism and a plague, so they obviously had to scrap that. How well do you think they recovered from that with the Flag Smashers subplot?
I think they did about as well as they could given the space that they had in this series. And what I mean by that is the part of the Flag Smashers I liked the best is when we saw the camps. When we saw the resettlement/refugee camps. We saw them building a life, and it had every hallmark of we are a displaced people who are trying to make things work. We're trying to work within the system. It's not happening. And now we need to go outside of that system and make sure that we can provide for ourselves and also challenge the system that's put us here in the first place. All that I got from the series. I thought they did a great job with it. But there were just so many little moments with the Flag Smashers where if they could have just had 15 minutes where we see someone deciding to take the super soldier serum, one of the Flag Smashers deciding to take it, where we see them defying the power broker who could be off screen, where we see just one of the decisions that led to this point to make it land better and also give a better sense of where their mission stood in the world.
That's all spot on. I did appreciate that their plan was relatively simple and relatively straightforward, though, and did make some sense, right? They wanted to wake people up to the plight of displaced people. That felt like where they were at the beginning of the series, and that they wanted to steal and bring things to folks in displaced camps like the vaccines that they were taking, which again, once you know they're doing a bioterrorism story, the vaccines probably played a much different role in the original script. Whatever, they covered that beautifully, but their terrorism was originally awareness focused and Robin Hood style stuff. But then the Patch Act thing came up, and their big move was, hey, we want to stop this thing that's going to harden borders and displace a bunch of other people. And that was their big plan. And it was simple but coherent, ill-conceived maybe, but in a way that I buy, given that we're talking about a lot of teenagers who do not have a lot of experience attacking world governments.
Right. And a lot of desperate people who have physical power but don't have the political or financial power necessarily to have come up with a more clever plan. Even Baron Zemo's revenge on the Flag Smashers at the end, that was because of resources. That was because he had the ability to sit back, plot, scheme. And as we found out, he is a real goddamn Baron with a whole lot of money who can do that, who can have his butler do that.
Yeah, that butler. I hope we see him again.
What if the butler is Captain America 4?
What if it's really the original Baron Zemo? Remember in the comics, the one that we get most of the time is the son of the original Baron. What if this guy's like the hidden, like he's an ex-Nazi, so he's supposed to be dead, and he's behind. Now it doesn't really work. This character, the Baron Zemo we get in the MCU, thank God, has no Nazi associations.
Yeah, and there are apparently 13 different Baron Zemos in the comics.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
I missed a couple.
There's a lineage. So there's a lineage going back hundreds of years.
Okay, well, shows how much I know, and I think I know a lot about these things, but apparently not.
I'm going to go back to our a lighter question.
Great.
On Friday, when this show came out, of course, I watched Falcon and Winter Soldier first. Then I transitioned over to the new Mortal Kombat movie.
As one does.
Yes. And I will say that for anyone who's looking for something to fill in the time for the next few weeks while we're waiting for Loki, it's not bad. Not great, but not bad. Plus side, it does everything I want a needlessly violent movie to do. It's just over the top gory, cartoonishly so. The characters are straightforward. The plot and motivation makes total sense. It's a little rough around the edges. And, if you at all like Mortal Kombat, there aren't a ton of characters in it. So chances are somebody that you wanted to see won't be in it. But I wanted to talk about one character in particular from the movie. Mortal Kombat, not Falcon and Winter Soldier. But I wanted to talk about Jax Briggs. Now, do you remember Jax from Mortal Kombat? Were you a Mortal Kombat guy?
I played multiple Mortal Kombats. What I remember is Jax was a black character with metal arms. Do I have that right?
You do. And you've just described the thing that made me think, is he just both the Falcon and Winter Soldier smashed together into a single character?
Oh my God. Wait, yeah, okay, sure. Because his arms even look like Bucky's arms, if I recall. They have that Colossus-y kind of...
Like striped metal.
Striped metal, yeah, that's the term. For anyone who's seen Colossus from the comics, that's where the arm design that we get for Winter Soldier feels inspired by that and felt like it in the comics for Winter Soldier, too. Yeah. So I only have vague recollections of him because I feel like he must have come along later. When did this dude arrive in the Mortal Kombat franchise?
So he was in Mortal Kombat 2. So the second game he came in.
Which was a pretty big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, from what I remember from Mortal Kombat 2, he wasn't a super popular character. Because at that point, you had the choice of, well, obviously the various ninjas and Liu Kang and Raiden and everyone else. So you had a lot of characters who were kind of supernatural magic users.
Right.
And then he was just a guy with metal arms who was strong.
Yeah. The question I have for you is, does Jax believe in the fundamental goodness of people and the possibility of change through our institutions of power, Jesse?
Having seen Mortal Kombat the movie, I have to say, those themes were explored in depth in between the various gory fights where they were just slaughtering ninjas and each other.
So wait, does he believe the same things that Sam believes, I guess is what I'm asking.
I truly have no idea what Jax believes. From Mortal Kombat the movie, what I gather he believes is that he likes to kick ass, take names, and he likes his big, strong metal arms. That is about the extent of his character.
How many children, then, could Jax lift with his metal arms based on what you know about his fighting prowess? We know that Bucky can lift at least 3 children.
Yeah. I would say 3. I would say 3 per arm, honestly. Okay. Because his arms, although not made of vibranium, are still magical arms.
Yeah.
And so I have to assume magical arms means 3 children per arm, 4 children per arm.
Okay. Yeah, we need to measure, I believe, the international measurement for the strength of your metal arm should be in number of pre-adolescent children you are able to lift comfortably with your arm. That's my submission for the international measurement.
So, like, you get your metal arm, and then you have to immediately go to a 6th grade classroom.
Right.
And with proper supervision, because otherwise it gets creepy. But yeah, yes. Proper supervision. Just have kids latch onto your arm until the arm fails.
That's right.
And then you get your rating.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which we all know is the most important thing, is to rate the strength of your metal arm. But we are talking about fighting, Jesse. So I want to talk about where people fight. Because in this finale, we got several classic fight scene locations. We got parking garages. We got construction sites. We got the always cinematic industrial basement. What are your favorite types of fight scene settings? And is there one you'd like to see in the MCU that we have not seen yet?
As a person who grew up in the 90s, who was very influenced by 90s action movies, I always love the lobby of the evil corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if there's water features, statues, just anything that can blow up. You have to have... So I think the lobby of any evil corporation has to have certain features.
Okay.
First, it has to have large pillars.
Marble, I assume? Only marble, right?
Only marble. Because marble, when it's shot, it flecks off nicely to show that it just missed the hero as they're running across the room to get to, the bomb that's been dropped or the gun that they need to find or the whatever. But you always have to do the hero run. And other than that, a secret guilty pleasure of mine is the movie Sudden Death starring Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Okay.
And I don't know if you ever saw this.
I don't know if I've seen it either. Talk to me about it, and maybe I will remember that I rented that VHS in whatever year.
So Jean-Claude Van Damme, in perhaps the role he was born to play, was a Pittsburgh firefighter.
Okay, I don't think I saw this one, man. No, I don't think I did.
And in quintessential 90s fashion, he just is Belgian. And there's no explanation of why a Belgian man is in Pittsburgh as a firefighter. But of course, he has a daughter. I believe it's a daughter in the movie. Might be a son, but I do believe it's a daughter. And they're supposed to go to a Pittsburgh Penguins hockey game. The game is targeted by terrorists. And so Jean-Claude Van Damme, during the hockey game, has to sneak around the entire arena filled with people without alerting anybody to the threat of the terrorists, and also stop the terrorists, sometimes in the rafters, sometimes in the back rooms, sometimes underneath the stadium, I think, or underneath the arena. And I've always loved that premise of you're fighting the bad guys in a large public space where people do not know and cannot know what's going on. I love that premise.
That ratchets up the tension considerably.
Right. And then it's called Sudden Death because I think the bomb was supposed to go off at the final horn of the game, and Jean-Claude Van Damme can't stop them in time. And this is probably not the plot of the movie, but I'm trying to make sense of the title Sudden Death. And so I think the game that they're at goes into overtime. And so that gives him extra time to stop the terrorists.
Of course it does. Foiled by the game-tying goal. I have to say, I'm generally a fan of the moving semi-truck scene. I was good in Age of Ultron when they were stealing the body that would become the Vision. It was good in Spider-Man Homecoming when he's stopping the Vulture's theft of those shield confiscations. And it was good in this series. I never feel disappointed by a moving semi-fight.
I agree with that. It always gives you the stakes of falling off the semi.
Yeah.
It's a chase. And so it manages to mix both a chase and a fight at the same time. And you can go in the truck or out of the truck.
Yeah. And you can be hit by highway signs above the semis, or, you could be attacked by a helicopter while you're up there. There's lots of options for that. What I want a fight to take place in the Marvel Universe is an underwater base. Like even an underwater hotel, maybe. It's a nice and enclosed space, so you get a lot of cramped creativity like you did in the Winter Soldier movie in the elevator fight scene. That's still, I think, the best one in the MCU. But also, even the strongest heroes have to breathe, Jesse. And if you blow a hole in the wall, then water pours in and you could drown. Even the Hulk can drown, I think. So that feels like a terrifying complexity that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, we've had space a little bit, and we've had the vacuum. But yeah, we've never had water.
I am over ledge fights, though. I don't like a ledge dangle. I feel like you get one of two things. The hero who's trying to help the falling villain who refuses the hand and then through their hubris falls to their death. Or you get the hero dangling and the villain's doing the classic finger stomping scene and then the hero looks down. Oh my God, it's so hot. I hate ledge fights. I'm over it.
And in a universe where a lot of people can fly and have super strength, there just aren't a lot of natural ledge scenes that can be set up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus we had Vormir and the whole Hawkeye Black Widow thing, so that's poisoned it even more for me.
Right. I'm with you. Let's get rid of the ledge scenes in their entirety.
They had their day.
So I want to go on to another fun topic before we start to get into more of our serious stuff. One of the things that I really liked about this episode was we got what I like to call the Spider-Man hero love scenes. And we've seen these in all the Spider-Man movies where New Yorkers always show up for Spider-Man. They love him. They cheer for him because they know that regardless of what anyone says, he's their hero. And in this episode, we got that with the new Captain America. And the people who were saying it, I believe, were uniformly people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, they were even talking to each other about it, like, that's Black Falcon. No, that's the new Captain America. How exactly you know that? I guess the shield is just such a powerful symbol that you're like, no, he's actually changed his name. It's not just a new costume.
Yeah. He filed the trademark. I was looking at it online. I did a FOIA request and confirmed it.
Like I saw that he changed his Twitter handle. It's at Captain America. He got the official one. I know what it is. A Black Captain America is going to inspire a whole lot of hip hop lyrics and songs. True. And the first thing I thought about after this episode was that he was just going to be the subject of so many name drops. And John Walker in particular, that guy is just going to be dragged through the mud.
Man. Yeah.
So what artist would you most want to make a song about or reference Sam Wilson?
Well, I got to start with R.I.P. MF Doom because he would have been the true iconic choice here. It would have been the top choice for me if he were still with us. And I'm kind of sad that we don't get to see a weird, awesome concept album from MF Doom on Sam Wilson. But if you're just asking me personally, with the available options, what I actually would be most entertained by, Jesse, it would be some kind of extremely raunchy Megan Thee Stallion song about Sam, what she wants to do to Sam, what Sam does to her, or possibly a three-way with her and Sam and Bucky. I just think it would be awesome and hilarious and amazing to hear just how actually nasty she would like to get with Sam. And honestly, I don't think this one is out of the realm of possibility.
Like, it might happen in real life.
I really want it to. I'm hoping she's a fan of the show and is going to take this forth and put this into the universe.
If that is the end credit song for Captain America 4.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? They'd have to bleep the whole damn thing. If it's the way I want it, they'll have to bleep the whole damn thing.
Oh, for me, given that Sam is from Louisiana My first thought goes to New Orleans-based rappers. I want Juvenile. I want the big timers. I want the hot boys making a song about Sam Wilson.
That's so good.
And it would just be like, it would be 7 minutes long. It would go into every possible topic. It would have entire digressions about the Falcon, about War Machine, whatever. The artist I wouldn't want to see, even though, you know, much respect to most of his discography, but at this point in his career, I would not want to see Jay-Z make a song about Sam Wilson.
It would be too earnest or on the nose or something, right?
It would just be, there would just be a lyric about how like Captain America used to be white. Now it's all right because he's black. And it's like, it would be too much of like, here is what this means. And I'm just going to make a rhyme about it.
So if you don't want that, that's the number one thing you don't want. Then by extension, that means you are more interested in a Macklemore album called Step Aside, in which he talks about the importance of white Captain America stepping aside so that he can fall all over himself, proving what like a woke white guy he is. It sounds like you'd be really interested and excited about that one.
I nearly hit leave on the Zoom call.
That's my please God no. Because I just feel I could see him trying to like talk shit to John Walker. Look, I'm talking shit to John Walker. It's fun to talk shit to John Walker, but there's just something about Macklemore where we don't need him involved.
There's enough earnestness in the world about this, and I'm sure that there's going to be all sorts of inspirational pieces. Sam will probably get his own Good Morning America hit. We don't need that in the music about Sam Wilson. I just want to hear something funny and obscene and spectacular.
Yeah, no, me too. Well, I want to put you on the spot, Jesse. Let's talk about some more meta shit. I feel like there's more to unpack here. Do you have something for me on this front?
I do. Going to the comics, if you're a person who mainly interacts with the MCU through the movies and you don't have a ton of background in the comics, one, I envy you in a lot of ways because it doesn't set you up every episode to be wondering, are the 15 things that I once read about when I was 12 years old going to happen in this episode? I think it's a much more pure way of experiencing the show and helps you in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But one of the things Marvel has done over, I would say, the past 2 decades across all of its characters, and with Iron Man and Captain America in particular, has done for much longer than that, is attempt to diversify their characters and the identities of people who can be those characters. We've talked a lot over the course of the show about, you know, cancel culture and complaints about wokeness and worrying about whether the show would get embroiled in the idea that they had a white character be Captain America who turned out to be terrible and a black character who ended up taking the mantle after the white character failed. What people would read into that. And as we've seen, I think most people have taken it as a pretty textual change and not tried to go outside of it and complain about Marvel or Disney canceling John Walker or anything like that. But how much do you think Marvel's efforts to diversify its roster and to recontextualize who can be these characters aided the ability of the audience to accept Sam Wilson as Captain America here?
Right. So how much did the comic stuff help us on the MCU stuff? Is that what you're poking around on?
Yeah.
One thing I can tell you that it probably steeled them for was they probably got used to, and I'm hoping a bit inoculated from nerd rage, right? So many people, I recall, were mad about Jane Foster becoming Thor or Sam becoming Cap or killing Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe so that Miles Morales could step forward. So being able to crisis manage that shit on the comic side has to help them prep for what it's going to be like on the MCU side. They've seen all the angry emails and death threats and Facebook page rants that are going to come their way. Now, because it's the comics, they also walked a lot of that shit back in the comics. Thor returned, Cap became Cap again, and all that shit. But they did keep Ms. Marvel front and center. They kept Miles front and center. A lot of the newer characters are thriving. But I don't know if anything can save comics as a medium. It feels a very challenged space, at least in the weekly, monthly release of individual issues. But I do think their efforts the last 10 years have given them some roadmaps to prepare America for a future in which not every single goddamn hero is a cis white guy.
Right. And even thinking about what if there's going to be another mainline Avengers movie, which I assume the brand for Disney and Marvel is so strong, I don't think there's any way you don't have another Avengers movie. Even thinking about that initial Battle of New York circle where they're all standing around and you get the nice pan shot going around. Captain America is black now. Tony Stark is dead. And the replacement, if we're going comics wise or even movie wise, is either going to be Gwyneth Paltrow or Riri Lionheart.
But she's got a show confirmed. It's going to be Riri, buddy.
Right. So between those, we know Jane Foster is going to be worthy of wielding the power of Thor. I don't know if we're going to get that in sort of mainline Avengers movie. But we know that when they do that shot, and I guarantee you they're going to redo that shot once they've come to another full roster of Avengers, it's going to look a lot different and a lot more diverse. And I'm excited about that.
Me too. I hope that they give those characters the space to breathe, because if I've learned anything from these shows, it's that there is so much richness in the small moments, and I want more of that, even when it comes to the movie. So, Jesse, I'm going to do something that is unprecedented in the short history of PonderVision. I'm stealing a question.
What?
I'm taking it away. You hinted at it earlier, and I'm dying to know your answer now. Because there's so much to unpack in these little moments, and we wanted more from stuff, I now have to know what you were thinking about the question you mentioned earlier. If there were 2 more episodes of this show, what would you have explored?
So as we'll remember from episode 3 of Falcon and Winter Soldier, there's that great moment at the beginning of the episode where you see the GRC ad. Looks like a pharmaceutical ad. You've got roses and puppies and happy families running through fields. And then it's contrasted with Captain America and a bunch of faceless police rolling up in a dirty van to basically effect a no-knock warrant on a Flag Smashers hideout. And more of that. I wanted more of that. How is the GRC actually working in the real world versus how it's portraying itself, which would also give us more insight into what the Flag Smashers actually thought of the GRC and why their message was apparently so appealing to so many people. Because we know the Flag Smashers weren't just this core group of people who took super soldier serum. There were at least hundreds of them, maybe thousands, and getting a sense of why there was all this opposition to the GRC. Second thing, some time just spent in the world post-blip with people who are not superheroes. Even just a 10-minute scene before Sam or Bucky walk on, or just moments interspersed throughout, just how an average person goes about their day, what they're thinking about, what's concerning to them, so that we just get a sense of like the world that things are grounded in before we move on to the superhero stuff. Because I feel like that's the one thing that's been missing from the post-blip MCU. And especially given the contrast between Spider-Man Far From Home and then these television shows, is the world is normal enough that you can go on a class trip to Italy, but also fucked up enough that Wanda's taken over an entire blighted town in New Jersey, and there's an entire group of international freedom fighters, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, who are willing to fight against and murder to take down this one world government that's coming about. Or I don't even know. It's also odd. Is it a one? Would you say at this point the GRC is a one world government? Or
dude, I have a whole question about that. We're going to get to that. Don't. You know what? I propose that you steal my question about that.
I will
after we're done here.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So those are my big things.
So I want to get. You've inspired me to actually change my answer to this question. So here's one of the episodes. I'll keep one of the ones I was going to propose if we're going to do 2 more episodes. I'm not as concerned about some of the stuff that you raised. They're super valid points, don't get me wrong. But I felt like the teacher, for example, that Sam interacted with gave me a lot to work with in terms of why I understand why these people feel frustrated and displaced. And I feel I can extrapolate some of the just natural problems that even this dumbass senator guy raised to Sam about what happens when you're displaced from your house or any of those things. So that stuff doesn't bother me too much, but I actually do want to understand what you were talking about, which is how this group gets so popular. So imagine an episode that is entirely centered on maybe a young recruit joining the Flag Smashers. who then maybe sacrifices themselves by the end of the episode for the cause. So they become the A plot for this episode, not the B plot. So we get inside of their beliefs, inside of their recruiting system, inside of the ways people connect with them and what draws them to them. And then you could tie it to a B story of Sam and Bucky in pursuit of the group. And this new kid becomes so invested that in the end, he sacrifices himself to save them all. And one of the other good things that would do is let us do away with that weird, pointless sacrifice at the end of episode 1, which felt forced and like he didn't actually need to sacrifice himself so they could get away on that plane. You know what I'm talking about? Or maybe that was episode 2. I don't remember. But yeah, I feel like that would be one of the episodes that could be a really cool look inside the organization. They become the A story. But the one I would have really loved, Jesse, a full episode flashback of Isaiah in the 50s. That reverse First Avengers story, I really feel like it could have been so much fun and also tragic to have had that dropped on us, to complete with that Bucky run-in that they alluded to. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just him in prison and how he got out. There are so many options. But a full episode flashback for Isaiah Bradley feels like something that would have driven home the ideas that he raises. It would have been show, not tell.
I like that a lot. And especially given that we've discussed on this show, I know that you've discussed with Christine this week as well, but Isaiah's story is incredibly important, and important in a way that is not necessarily told to the audience. It's hinted at, but the implications of it are far deeper than the show delivers on. And to be able to see that in real time, even if we just get to see the room where Isaiah sits while people die around him and he's fine.
Yeah.
The missions that he gets. Yeah. Just stuff like that. And maybe we will get that, because obviously you're going to have to cast a different actor.
Sure.
So it's possible that we even get maybe like a one-off of that or something related to that in a later show or movie. But that would have been so great in this show.
That's a Memorial Day drop they should do sometime. That would be really cool.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to now take your question
all right,
based on what we were discussing.
All right.
So the GRC, again, is kind of a quasi one world government. It's unclear.
Sure.
Because does this one senator run it? Does somebody else run it? Who's the head of it? We know they have like a sort of chamber that can be taken over, and it has a ton of screens because it's a TV show. And so anything where important stuff happens has to have 14 giant TV screens. But is the GCU here to stay for the long haul? And if so, how long do you think it's here to stay? Is it going to be a good thing if it stays, or is it going to be a bad thing if it's still around?
I don't like this thing. I'm ready for it to go away. I'm hoping it disbands soon. Maybe Captain America 4 will be the place that it goes away. Here's why. Because you just said it. It doesn't make sense. How does this one senator become the sole face of the GRC and the US government? If I'm reading this properly, he appeared to have fiat power to name Captain America. Is the president calling him and begging him for the opportunity to weigh in? They're talking about an organization that can rewrite the borders of the world. I feel like this senator asshole is the most important person in the US government. I want to know how he got there. What was the selection process? He's firing military people. He's hiring people into the CIA. He's ridiculous. And I don't like any of this, and I want more checks and balances, Jesse. Do you have any guess as to how this thing works at all?
I've thought about this. Like, if I were both designing it and how I believe it has been designed.
Okay, great. Please help me out.
So I'm going to go with the how I believe it has been designed. So the way that I understood it to work is that it was sort of a quasi-governmental body that was tasked with kind of the direct administrative issues related to the blip. So the GRC was the group that, you would go to and say, we were all located in country X when the snap happened. The blip happened. We're still here, but now we don't have homes. They have been torn down. Somebody else bought them. We just don't have a place to go. maybe even international borders changed, you could see a lot of different conflicts around the world where if populations disappear and you happen to have military force still left over, one country takes advantage of that and kind of encroaches on the border of another country. All that makes total sense, and it would be too much to explain all of that. And,
sure, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't mind a PDF published on the internet.
Yes. And so the sense I got was that the GRC was this administrative body that grew and grew and grew in power. Because as many of these things do, you have an entity whose job was to do X. It was to make sure that all displaced people have kind of a place to rely on, a place to get food and blankets and shelter and vaccines. And then it turned into, well, we've got this issue, the GRC will handle it. We've got this thing, the GRC will handle it. Like, we'll just let them deal with it. We'll give them some police powers. And then it grows and grows and grows. And all of a sudden they can appoint Captain America for some reason.
Yeah.
Now, if I were designing it, I would almost get, and this is partially my background too, I would almost give the GRC quasi-judicial power, like an international court, instead of what it turned out to be, which is also kind of a very typical TV/movie thing to do, just like the council of people who decide shit.
They have a circular table, the lights are weird. Yeah. But wait, what would making it an international judicial body do for it?
So instead of it being a body that actually makes the decisions, it's a body that you go to determine whether the decisions countries are making, whether with each other or on their own, accord with whatever set of principles people agree to.
Okay.
So they would be the people that you would go to and say, you know, there are 5,000 Tunisians who have been displaced because of choices that were made in that country. They're currently located in Italy, and here is our plan. And this is the council that says, okay, your plan to build, you know, X number of housing units to get them back in Tunisia by this date is fine. Like, and we might have some enforcement powers to make them do that. As opposed to this kind of weird, like, we just meet once a month and decide whether borders exist.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I dig that.
Also, this is why I'm not a TV writer, because what I just described would make for terrible television.
Would it though? Because I feel I could use at least a web series that is GRC adjudication. You get this prosecutor. Look, law dramas are the lifeblood of television, Jesse.
And we're going to get She-Hulk, so we know that this is something Marvel's looking at.
What if Jennifer Walters is cutting her teeth at the GRC judicial hearings as an intern who becomes, or, well, maybe not intern. I guess she's got to be like a second chair, whatever. You guys, you know the legal terms. I don't know these legal terms, but it would be awesome to see people fighting for displaced people's rights. All that shit could be amazing, actually. So I don't know. Don't sell your TV writing skills short. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. So what have you got for me?
All right, Jesse, we've been avoiding our uncomfortable questions, but it's time. It's time. We have to get into them. Now, I gave my answer on Storycast for the one I'm going to ask you a little bit, but I really do want your thoughts. This is really important to me, and we haven't talked at all about this, so I really want to know what you think, because I loved Wakanda being in the show. It was awesome. And I love that Sam's uniform was made by Wakanda. I think that's a really powerful statement. But in a story that is fundamentally about democracy, you know, and how it should work, Wakanda plays this aspirational role, something we look up to, something I think America and Americans are looking up to as we watch this show. But they're not a democracy. And so how do we reconcile their role as this aspirational government, country, and participant in this story? How do we reconcile that?
I think the first answer is that we don't necessarily.
Okay.
That we look at Sam's story as one that is focused on his particular circumstances. And that his particular circumstances are being a black man in America, taking on the mantle of America's protector/vanguard. And presumably, America's playing a very large role in the GRC, while Wakanda perhaps is not. And also Wakanda's kind of uniquely situated, because even at the moment of Infinity War, they were so isolated. you wouldn't really see a ton of Wakandans being displaced. The most you would see are the Wakandans who were maybe doing secret missions elsewhere. And it's not as if Wakanda would say, okay, like, we're not going to take you back, or they would come back and not necessarily have a place to go. It kind of seems like that would take care of itself. With respect to the idea that Wakanda has designed the Captain America costume, and at some point someone's going to ask Sam, like, where'd you get the new costume from? Because I've always assumed the Falcon costume came from the military.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the backpack did from Winter Soldier's backstory.
Right, and was also presumably repaired by the military or Torres or some combination when it was broken. And at that point, I think you have to look at what Wakanda means to African Americans in particular. We know that after Black Panther, Wakanda had set up sort of the Oakland Outreach Embassy. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was kind of a mixture of like an embassy, a learning annex, and whatever else it ultimately became.
Right.
And so I also have to assume that it would be seen more as a diplomatic nod, in the same way that, you know, the leader of one country would give a meaningful cultural artifact to another country that showed the value of that country, the value that the countries had to each other. And so from Wakanda's perspective, is it actually a really smart political move to outfit the new Captain America with a suit that will protect him and keep him safe?
Sure.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Okay, I'm into that. But your answer makes me wonder. We talked a second ago about the particulars of the GRC, how it should work, what would make actual sense. In this universe, why wouldn't they have turned more to Wakanda for leadership? Because we know Wakanda's out there in the world more, like you were saying. They have solved the scarcity problem. It's something Amanda talked about on Storycast. It feels like a weird miss, although maybe they just didn't want to put them in the position of having to be the asshole here. But in the real world, I feel like it would have been a great opportunity for Wakanda to take advantage of the Western governments being all tied up in knots to say, hey, there's another way to do things. You know, a little more radical redistribution would really go a long way.
Well, there's two things we don't know about Wakanda at this point. One is how they survived for 5 years when Black Panther disappeared.
True.
The leader of their government was gone. And we also don't know how decimated their government was.
True.
During that period. So they could have been dealing with many of the same issues.
Yeah. Maybe I'm romanticizing this shit too much. I'm just out here thinking Wakanda's got their shit figured out. We don't know. Io is certainly not telling Bucky what's going on.
Yeah. And the one problem the world didn't have during the blip was scarcity.
Oh, right. Of course.
Yeah. And so to that sort of, to how Wakanda played into that, if Wakanda is a country of plenty with potentially a serious issues of governance, serious issues of figuring out how the country works, Wakanda actually becomes a lot like every other country in that regard. They might have much better technology that allows them to bounce back more quickly. Maybe they shared that, maybe they didn't. But a lot of countries are going to end up on those two fronts looking just like Wakanda. And I could see Wakanda saying, we just sort of opened ourselves up to the world. Now we've got this issue. Like, we need to deal with our own stuff the same way everyone else is. We'll be back when we're back.
Fair enough. They certainly don't owe anybody jack shit.
Yeah. So here's my question for you. Did Sam actually honor Isaiah with his spot in the Captain America Museum? And I don't just mean because it appears to be the spot where they used to have like a merchandise cart where they just put up a little gold statue and a plaque. But we know that Isaiah's story is not the story of a proud veteran who fought for his country.
Mm-mm.
It is a far deeper, darker, and more disturbing story. That's not just his story either. It is the story of every man who got put into that program, who died for reasons that they didn't know, being given drugs that they were the purpose of which was not disclosed to them. And Isaiah Bradley was the sole survivor of a very dark moment in American history. Shouldn't that display have mentioned the government experimentation, the imprisonment? Does the whole thing just end up whitewashing not only those sacrifices of the others who didn't make it into that presentation, who didn't make it into that display. But of Isaiah himself, it flattens Isaiah to this very palatable, easy to digest person who just was a black person who got the super soldier serum, who fought as a version of Captain America, and who now just makes it into a tiny part of a museum that's largely dedicated to Steve Rogers.
I cannot wait to hear your answer to this. One thing I'll say is you can tune into Character Cast to hear Christine's brilliant insights on why Isaiah is the only person with the right to tell his own story, and why it's dehumanizing to take somebody's personal story of trauma away from them without their consent. To your points about experimentation and imprisonment, I do have some good news, bad news. It does mention both on that little plaque. The quote I spotted that we talked about on Character Cast, as you might recall, was that, it mentioned that some individuals in the government may have attempted to erase him. That is not accurate. It's misleading. It's basically a falsehood. It creates this idea of like a couple rogue actors as opposed to a systemic problem. Again, Character Cast for all of that. There was something I glanced off of on Character Cast that I do think you are also touching on with this question, which is how fucked up it is that this is just one tiny little back corner. I will draw your attention to the fact that not only do we talk a lot in this series about the Sokovia Memorial, we know that the Snapped people had memorials. So it stands to reason that these black soldiers who died as a result of experimentation they did not consent to or have any awareness of deserve every bit the same level of attention and specificity and naming and historical reference. They deserve their own exhibit. And it bothers me that this show didn't really stop to say that and think that they could think that 3 paragraphs on one plaque with one guy would somehow suffice. I feel like Isaiah would feel guilty looking at that exhibit and thinking about all of the unnamed people that his legacy is now essentially standing on, shadowing over, and erasing.
And to the point you brought up earlier that Christine discussed about how that was Isaiah's story, it's also the story of every single soldier who was involved in that program. And telling people about Isaiah raises more questions than it answers, unless you have decided to hide all of that.
Ugh.
At which point it just becomes, he was a brave man who took the super soldier serum. Some people didn't like that because he was black, or some people didn't like making it public because he was black.
Right.
Accordingly, like here's his statue.
No, the plaque says that, that this was without their consent or whatever, but how would this not be the biggest story in journalism for not just a month, but like a year, 2 years, even in a world with Thanos and the blip and all of that? The idea that the US killed a bunch of people with non-consensual super soldier serum experiments feels like something we would be talking a lot about.
And not only that, but we saw a group of people who all somehow found super soldier serum, took it, and then embarked on a campaign that resulted in the loss of life, the loss of property, the potential dissolution of international borders, precisely because a handful of people got the super soldier serum, took it, and used that power to accomplish political goals. So between the sensitivity of that, then finding out that John Walker, who was Captain America, unbeknownst to the government, dosed himself with super soldier serum and still has side effects from it. Like, it was even clear in the U.S. agent scene, he still had the little ticks. He's not completely okay from having taken the super soldier serum. So you take those two things, then you add on top of it, the super soldier serum itself was a part of a dark campaign of experimentation and exploitation. And to just make it a small exhibit in a Captain America museum, not even its own thing.
Nope.
Not even an acknowledgement elsewhere.
That's what it deserved. It deserved its own separate exhibit. that just seems straightforward. Again, if everyone who died in Sokovia deserves an exhibit, and I'm not arguing with that, of course they do. They deserve a memorial. That's terrible what happened to them. So do these soldiers, and they deserve to be named. And obviously Sam should have handled the whole thing differently, but so should the Smithsonian.
Since the MCU began, how overworked are memorial makers at this point?
Man, it's a lucrative field. I'm assuming there's a WPA style project wherein the government employs a lot of people through it. So I like to think that in the MCU, this is a way in which they're resolving some of the snap blip problems, just memorial making, because a lot of shit's going on.
Well, and then you got to tear down the old memorials to all the people who disappeared because they didn't disappear anymore. And can you imagine walking past, even in Endgame, when Scott Lang comes back, and that is not a small memorial.
Mm-mm.
That is an entire park full of just dead people from that area alone.
Yeah.
And can you imagine coming back and you and your family, your family who was here and you who left, and you walk past that and you read your name and just all the feelings that bring up every day? I feel like there's got to be just a mass movement to tear all of that down immediately.
And replace it with affordable housing, because clearly that is the thing in greatest demand in the MCU.
Of course.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, and it's a yes or no question. It's the one thing we didn't get to in our entertaining questions section, Jesse, but I want to get you on the record before we escape from this season finale analysis. Jesse, is Sharon Carter a Skrull? Yes or no?
I'm going to go no. And even though I think that both outcomes are equally valid and each has their own set of stories that can be told, I think the story works better if Sharon is a betrayed person who is carrying out these schemes based on a disillusion with the world. I like her better that way, and I like her as a character and as a villain better if she's someone who has that direct connection to these events and has just kind of given up on the entire superhero idea and is just taking advantage of the fact that she still has these people's trust.
That's the better story. No argument there. But I do think, as I said on Character Cast, I am 100% on the page that they are setting up Secret Invasion through this. Now, Christine's pushback on that, because she is with you, this is not a Skrull, was that Sharon was all about money and not about power at the end. So, since recording Character Cast, I went back and watched that ending. And what Sharon says is, and I quote, "Super soldiers might be off the menu, but we're about to have access to government secrets, prototype weapons, you name it, should be something for everyone." You could read that as stuff to sell, but I would think that would be like, we're going to make a lot of money, not should be something for everyone. I don't think that says profit. I think that says power. I think that's all about infiltrating the government and feels like a great setup for Secret Invasion.
Entirely possible. So far, though, have we seen any evil Skrulls?
No, they're definitely have to do some work there because they could fuck that up real bad.
Yeah, because right now, the Skrulls are, they're Nick Fury's friends, and they are the sort of innocent, hunted people that Captain Marvel saved. So to create, you're going to have to go do, maybe not retconning, but you're going to have to do some serious backstory to explain why there are evil Skrulls infiltrating world governments. Well,
I'm assuming Olivia Colman has been hired for a reason, Jesse, and it's to convince you of how this is possible.
And if anyone can, she can.
Exactly. So the true last question I have for you, Jesse, before we wrap up on an incredible run here, it's been so fun to talk to you about all of this, and I thank you for rolling with every weird left turn, both in this episode and all the ones before. Where can people find and follow you?
They can find and follow me on Twitter at Jesse L. Taylor, all one word.
All right, legendary listeners, that is our show for today. Do not look away because the Marvelous TV Club has so much in store for you. That epic crossover is on the books. Look for it next week. All throughout May, we're going to bring you some cool interviews and conversations. And then in June, we will preview Loki and get back to our weekly schedule once it begins. So look for about one episode per week, give or take, until then. In the meantime, Jesse, let's go visit Steve on the moon.